Hi everyone, this is Jen van Englenhoven, and I wanted to take some time today to talk about the topic of ambiguous grief and loss. This is a topic that's not very well known. There's not a ton of research on it, but I think it's a really important aspect to think about, particularly with singles. So the basis of a lot of the research that we have for ambiguous grief and loss comes from family therapy work, where they were working with families that there was a member of the family that had either been missing in action, had been kidnapped, some reason why they weren't in the family anymore, and they weren't sure if the person was still alive or if they had passed on. And so these families were left in limbo of trying to decide, do we grieve the loss and move on as if they're not part of our family anymore? Do we still continue to believe that they're alive and still act as if they're going to come home at some point? What is it that we do? How do we handle this person being gone from our life? And so it can cause some real interesting things to happen in families when that is present. And what I've noticed is that same type of ambiguous grief and loss happens for a lot of singles, particularly as singles get older and they have a continued loss of relationships. So they get into, in this case, a romantic relationship, and they have this hope or this dream of this relationship moving forward. They want things to happen, they want things to be happy and have that happily ever after. And when the relationship doesn't go to that place, when it doesn't move to the happily ever after, for whatever reason, there is a grief of losing this person. And our contemporary cultural construct for that is just move on. You know, you weren't married to them, you didn't make a life with them, so just move on and date someone new and, you know, get on the horse again really quickly. But what that doesn't take into account is that there was a hope of a relationship, there was a hope of a future, there was a vision maybe even of what that future might look like with that person, depending on how long they were together and those types of things. So when we move on and just start getting into another relationship, and we don't take the time to grieve the loss, we bring that grief, bring that loss into the next relationship, and it kind of just tags along with us. We kind of carry it on our back in a bag and kind of carry it with us, and it's harder for us to connect in this new relationship because of the old stuff that we have going on. So I always encourage people to take the time to grieve the loss of the relationship that they had. The second piece of this ambiguous grief that I'm really passionate about working with is the grief of maybe not necessarily that person, because sometimes the relationship is not functional enough to really be upset that that person's not there anymore because it wasn't a healthy relationship. But we may be grieving the loss of the hoped for relationship, the hoped for future that you thought you were going to have, even if it's not with that person. Sometimes this happens for people, you know, when they turn into their 30s or even their 40s and have not been married yet. They had this view of what their life was going to be like, and it's not there, it's not happening. And there's a certain amount of grief that needs to be worked through in order to be fully aware and present for relationships that are around you. I think this is a bigger problem and a bigger issue than a lot of people realize. This is something that I'm kind of turning towards in the practice that I do, not just with singles, but everyone, to really start stepping into the places of grief, to start stepping into the places of loss, so that we can have space for those things. there's a lot of really good research out there on this. If you will look in the comments below, I will post a link to a book that talks about ambiguous grief. It talks a lot about family stuff, but I think that that's really applicable to any relationship and the lived experience of that and how hard that is to work through. If you have more questions about ambiguous grief and loss, feel free to leave a comment below, ask me questions, or schedule some time to come in and talk to me. And hope this has been helpful for you, and I will talk to you soon.